information. See, the problem when you talk about, wait a minute, when you talk about who used it 50 years ago or 100 years ago, they didn't have information. They didn't know the damage of tobacco and alcohol and now marijuana and other drugs. We have a lot more information now than we did then.
But isn't this a free society? Aren't we supposed to have the right of choice in these matters?
If you're going to do that, you do.
If I'm not hurting you,
Just a minute.
if I don't want to drink and I want to smoke a joint instead of drinking, don't I have a right as an American to do that?
It's not about that right. It's about when do your rights end and mine begin and everyone else's begin. And in other words, don't step on my rights.
You're proposing to legalize drugs, though, that would exacerbate it.
I'm not proposing anything.
Well, no, the whole notion is, in that argument that the hypocrisy exists, therefore legalize it all. If cocaine,
or make it all illegal.
That might be...
We tried to make alcohol illegal, and the price was greater than allowing it into society.
And we have a lot more information. See, the problem when you talk about, wait a minute, when you talk about who used it 50 years ago or 100 years ago, they didn't have information. They didn't know the damage of tobacco and alcohol and now marijuana and other drugs. We have a lot more information now than we did then.
But isn't this a free society? Aren't we supposed to have the right of choice in these matters?
If you're going to do that, you do.
If I'm not hurting you,
Just a minute.
if I don't want to drink and I want to smoke a joint instead of drinking, don't I have a right as an American to do that?
It's not about that right. It's about when do your rights end and mine begin and everyone else's begin. And in other words, don't step on my rights.
Dr. Grinspoon, you favor the legalization of all drugs. Is that right? PCP?
No.
Glue sniffing? What?
I favor first of all, I favor the legalization of marijuana right away. I think that had we done this some time ago, we would have much more credibility as drug educators about these other drugs. But part of our problem is that we say that PCP is dangerous. These young people say, they told us that about marijuana and so forth. If we could begin to be credible, to begin to be honest about these things, people would begin to believe it. And the way to begin is to legalize marijuana now.
Have you ever smoked grass?
Oh, yeah.
Years ago, so you know that it's not the devil drug that everybody...
Well, that was the problem with movies like...
How about you, Dr. Mecca? You smoke grass?
In college, and if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have, because what I think is being sold here is the premise that it maybe isn't a dangerous drug. It is a dangerous drug.
I don't think you're up for a Supreme Court judgeship.
Show me a single dead body from marijuana.
No, you know, I feel there's one, because I love the repartee, and it's very stimulating, but there's also millions watching your program. It's a hit. Who are out there whose families have suffered children's losses or spouses.
The ones that are in jail.
Excuse me. The fact is, there are a lot of people who've been personally touched by this problem, the magnitude of it, who might be sitting back going, oh my Lord, are they really talking about legalizing? I need to reinforce the fact there isn't a responsible publicly elected official out here who would lead this country towards legalization of drugs, including marijuana.
There was George Schultz.
I debated George Schultz at Commonwealth, and he acknowledges he's off the mark.
Friedman, we're not the only ones talking about it.
Gatewood Galbraith just ran for the governorship of Kentucky on the Democratic platform to legalize marijuana in Kentucky.
It's wonderful seeing these cerebral academicians who sit behind closed doors dreaming of what the ideal economy would be.
Isn't that what you
Market forces. No, I've worked in all 58 counties in the state.
The casualties of marijuana use. The casualties are the sick people that can't get it as medicine.
Hang on a second.
What about the mom who's pregnant and is using crack cocaine? What about the violence she perpetrates on the fetus? What about the crime perpetrated by people who go on crack runs and then become paranoid and violent as a result of the drug on other individuals? Those are not crimes to support their habit. And also, what if the drug was readily available and then their life was centered around? We know that people self-medicate with cocaine when it's readily available till they die rather than eat and sleep. What about the welfare costs, the health costs, the violence, the criminal justice costs associated, and it has nothing to do with crime associated with trying to steal to support their habit.
Steve,
it is one of the spurious arguments ever made.
Crazed, paranoid crack addicts out there.
There are a lot of crazed people running around on alcohol, too. But I think that the law itself is causing more damage to our society than the use of the substance. And that's the thing that we have to address. We are arresting 300,000 people every year who are not committing a crime. All they're doing is they're saying, hey, I don't think this is bad for me and I want to use it. Maybe I don't want to drink alcohol. Maybe I want this instead. And you're taking those people and you're throwing them into a criminal environment for no reason.
Okay, yes, sir.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about how good and bad the effects of alcohol and tobacco are. What are some of the negative effects of smoking marijuana? What are the health problems associated with it? No one's talked about that yet.
Anybody want to tackle
43
that one?
carcinogens that you smoke The heat, the method of smoking.
Not one
lip
single
cancer,
case of lung cancer.
wait.
This is such disinformation. I can't believe it. Not one case of lung cancer has been attributed to marijuana. Why don't we let Dr. Grinspoon tell the truth about marijuana? The truth is people that smoke it live longer than the people that don't.
Dr. Grinspoon, you made a study of this. You made a study of this, did you not?
Yes.
Could you answer his question?
Yes, I'll be glad to. There have been many adverse effects attributed to marijuana. The government of the United States spent a lot of money during the 60s and 70s trying to prove these assertions. The proof failed. The reasoning then went, well, that's because Americans don't use marijuana, haven't used it long enough and don't use enough of it. So they financed studies in Costa Rica, in Greece, and Jamaica. These were all studies of approximately 30 subjects and 30 controls. Each of them, the average number of joints or spliffs smoked every day was about seven. The average length of use was over 17 years. What adverse effects did they come up with? A goose egg. Very little did they demonstrate.
But you're not saying that breathing hot smoke into your lungs is a
I
good
was just
thing
going to get
for
to
you.
that. Now, the one established adverse effect that I believe has to be taken seriously is the work of a California group, Tashkin and his people, who demonstrated that smoking cannabis is not good for the lungs, that a cannabis cigarette contains 4 to 5 times as much tar and particulate matter as a tobacco cigarette. But if you think of how much a marijuana user smokes, I mean, it isn't like, you know, we think of lung cancer, 20-pack years you have to have, or that's 1 pack a day for 20 years, or 2 packs a day for 10 years. There are very few, even at the ratio of 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, 20-pack year cannabis smokers. Furthermore, you know, someone talked about marijuana is much more potent now than it was in the 60s and the 70s. It sounds absurd, but the way to minimize the respiratory effects of cannabis is for people to smoke more potent marijuana. Because as the marijuana is more potent, as an investigator by the name of Halpern first demonstrated in the LaGuardia study, you give people as much marijuana as they want, and they only smoke enough to get the high and no more. So as a consequence, people who smoke more potent marijuana take fewer tokes of it and expose themselves to less risk.
Okay.
I think you're wrong. It's important to note that you don't have to smoke marijuana. There are millions of people that consume it in other ways.
Brownies,
You don't have
right?
to smoke it. You can
Well,
eat
wait a minute, wait a minute.
I don't want to
If
address the
Lester-
problem
if
of
Lester's
whether
gonna-
it's good or bad or anything like that. What I want to address the problem is, haven't we learned some lessons from prohibition? What kind of dangers it produces? I mean, we've seen how it boosts the price of alcohol, how the big mafias and whatever go after the money, and it causes all this violence and other things, all right? Now, there's not only violence going on over in Colombia, people dying in Colombia, there's violence going on over here. Now, I know there's a lot of health risks against drugs, there's a lot of health risks against alcohol, everything like that. But weren't we really just talking about prohibition and how dangerous that is? I mean, what kind of, it takes away our rights, doesn't it? In some...
Prohibition didn't work with alcohol, so why should it work with anything else?
Let me address, you asked the question, Ron, before about the crime issue. If anybody thinks that by legalizing any of the products of other substances, that there's not going to be crime. For example, if the government had a 2% tetrahydrocannabinol cigarette, or 4%, whatever it is, there's going to be a 10% and a 12% version, which you think actually believe is more helpful. That's going to be out there on the street. So the issue of crime, to expect there's no going to be black market is ridiculous. We know there's going to be a black market.
Black market in tobacco and alcohol, isn't
yeah,
it?
After Holland decriminalized drugs,
Checking on that.
yeah,
if drug-related crime dropped, after Holland decriminalized drugs.
If High Times and Lester are going to promote as a safe physiological drug, what about Lester? Come on, now you're going to be our resident physician. Are there any perception or behavioral response times and whatever that make it dangerous for somebody to smoke dope and drive, operate machinery in a factory? where
What impact
increasing
does it have?
accidents have been attributed to?
Just like alcohol.
What impact does it have on the development of adolescence? We know that's a very serious problem in the growing, with young people growing up.
Again, what about alcohol and tobacco?
You're right, but there's more. But
yes,
there's more
I am
likely,
right.
Ron. There's much more likelihood. And comment to what Andy said. There's much more likelihood that we would eventually, with the information we have, illegalize again, or make it illegal for tobacco and alcohol than there is to condone all of that and go ahead and say, well, we can't.
You might as well throw the Bill of Rights right
Correct me
out
if
the
I'm wrong,
window.
Rob. Aren't we still subsidizing tobacco growers?
Yeah, I know, and that's a policy we have to
through
question.
demand.
Ooh, sounds like
We're
hypocrisy to me.
everyone here is going to live to see a smokeless America. We are making progress with cigarette smoking.
That's
Alcohol
not your
consumption.
role to demand that people not smoke anything.
It's
this
through
country
choice.
started,
We're not
there were no
legislating it.
prohibition laws at all. That's the way it's supposed to be.